We bring in Sam Smith. Sam, of course, wrote The Jordan Rules about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. And it's hopefully got a spike in new book sales there, Sam, because Jordan talked about it in The Last Dance, and he singled out Horace Grant, one of his former teammates, as a snitch. Your reaction when you heard Jordan talk about that is Horace Grant as your snitch was what, Sam?
Yeah, I think we were talking about it with Todd the other day. Not to not to celebrate myself, but that's what we do on TV, right? But I had about a dozen years as investigative reporting and doing a number of things involved. Knew Phil Jackson from the CBA, spending time with him, Johnny Bach. From the early years when he was coach of the Warriors. He's from Brooklyn, so he was a longtime friend. Tex Winter, I used to sit with on the plane for years. In fact, one time he brought me, I was trying to understand the offense. So he brought me the book, his original triple post offense book that he had signed for his mother. And I said, "Well, Tex, I can't have your book you signed for your mother." He said, "Well, she died. She doesn't need it." And so, and so the notion was, well, I had to wait after all this till 1988 till a 22-year-old kid from rural Georgia came along saying, now I can do a book on this subject. So, yeah, I've sort of, kind of laughed at it after all those years about, trying to explain when Michael says something, hey, people say, well, Michael said it, how
But
could I be wrong?
but I know you're not going to give up your sources, but was Michael correct at all in Horace Grant being a now you would call it a source, Michael called it a snitch.
Well, doing that kind of, I mean, you're in journalism, so doing that kind of project, everybody's the source.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson, Johnny Bach, Jerry Reinsdorf, Jerry Krause. Even I had dinner on the road a couple of times, as frightening as that might sound, with Jerry Krause. When we were in Portland, one time I was hanging around in the, I think it was that season actually, in the lobby. Jerry came down to change his room 7 times, which he did quite a bit. He didn't like the mattress. He always had some issue. He said, "Hey, let's go have dinner." And I couldn't think fast enough, and so I ended up going.
But why
And
do you think Michael singled out Horace?
well, I think because you saw this and some of the reaction after the last dance with Horace and some of the players, being upset, sort of their documentary, I'm cutting in. Um, Horace stood up to Michael a lot back then, and a lot of the elements of the documentary early on, settling grudges kind of thing. Michael takes names and remembers. So Jerry Krause, Isaiah, and Horace in an odd way was sort of a protector for Scotty. Early on,
Really?
Scotty early on, they were incredibly close. I mean, literally would call each other before every game to decide what they were wearing. Went out and bought the same cars, bought the same dogs. They were inseparable. But Scotty was kind of seduced by Michael's aura and the attention with Michael, and he would gravitate over toward Michael. And then Michael, when he was sort of in his arc there, he didn't always. We've seen he didn't always treat you with perhaps the respect you'd like. So Scotty would come back to Horace and complain about, what he said to me and this and sort of that. And so Horace would stand up to Mike sometimes. And, when things happen, he wasn't as articulate, as quick, as facile. And so it didn't come off as cleverly. But that they had a long history of that. And then of course Horace being the one when he left and went to Orlando. And when the year Michael came back in 95, it was Horace who really, of course, Shaq and Penny were the best players. But what Phil had done in that series, realizing Horace not a great shooter, he doubled off Horace every time. Horace shot like 70% in the series, really hits the winning baskets. And then the Magic players lift him on their shoulders, carry him off. Horace raising his hand, sort of pointing at Michael.
Oh.
By the way, there was no after the end of that series, there was no teammates I mean, players going to congratulate the other team. Michael stalked off pretty fast after that one too. So he remembers a lot of evidence with Horace.
How's his playing in Chicago?
This has been great. This has been obviously in a lot of places in the country. It's kept us, given us something to look forward to. But for Chicago, it's been particularly special because it's not a city with a great history of sports success. Cubs 100 years until a World Series, 108 as it turned out. And here was a celebration of when it wasn't New York or Boston or L.A. Chicago was the center of the sports world for a decade. And so for the local community, especially with the Bulls having issues in the last, couple of decades, it's been a terrific opportunity to remember and sort of puff your chest out and say, hey, we were number one.
Talking to Sam Smith, he wrote The Jordan Rules, co-author of Derrick Rose's autobiography, I'll Show You, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. How are the book sales for The Jordan Rules? Has there been a spike since the documentary?
It's really interesting. I'm making the same on that as I am for this appearance. The book is out of print, and they haven't printed anymore.
They haven't.
No, it was sort of like one of those. Oh yeah, that would be a good idea. I think it's probably occurring to him right now that maybe it'd be a good idea. But I went and looked on Amazon. I couldn't buy one because people asking me. They say, "Well, could you give me a book?" I said, "Well, let me see if I could buy." I couldn't buy.
Oh wow!
So you don't pay for appearances, do you, Dan?
No, we don't.
Oh,
no.
All right, so I'm still even with the publisher.
Have you thought about adding an extra chapter to the Jordan Rules?
Yeah, actually, just now, publishers. Ever since I realized doing books, they're mostly good at just printing. They're really printers, sort of a version of what Benjamin Franklin was doing. So I think it's kind of occurred to them now, and so they just literally at the end of the documentary got back to me and said, "Well, we're thinking of maybe printing another edition, of course, later this year, and maybe you could write something for it." So yeah, so I probably will end up doing that, but I haven't yet.
Also, the whole flu game now became food poisoning. Why, after all of these years, that Michael never addressed this or clarified it until we got to the documentary? Why would he do it?
Well, it wasn't food poisoning. They made that up. That there were several things based on a true story kind of thing in this, and that was one of them. I mean, I know in our society we like to believe in conspiracies a lot because they're a lot more fun and interesting than the truth. Sort of like Michael being kicked out of the NBA, in which they addressed quite a bit because of the gambling and everything, which obviously wasn't the case. And David Stern and Brian McIntyre and Mark Vancil, any number of people commented on that. People, associated, but he wasn't poisoned. that's not what happened. And I mean, the story, if you watched, I mean, you did, and watching the documentary, I mean, seriously, 5 people, Michael Jordan, the most protected, nobody knows where he is, secure person. All of a sudden, 5 guys from a pizza place. And by the way, who's ordering pizza in Salt Lake City? But beyond that, and they were in Park City.
What do you think happened, Sam?
He was ill. There's no question. I think he had something that wasn't as manly as maybe some other episodes. I think because what they were doing, they were going up to Park City in the mountains in the ski area to stay. That's where they stayed. So they had to practice in Salt Lake City. So they kept coming in and out. And I think it was altitude sickness. The symptoms that he had fit that much more than anything else that he had. And so there was some sort of illness. There was no question he was ill. I wouldn't deny that. He definitely was.
Yeah.
He was sick, but he wasn't poisoned.
Yeah, but I don't understand. Why not just let this sleeping dog lie that it's the flu game? We celebrated this. I mean, now all of a sudden, even when he says it, Sam, in the documentary, he doesn't say it in a convincing manner that he had food poisoning. He looks away. He says it and he looks away. Like, hey, I gotta believe this. It was food poisoning. And I'm thinking, you got away with this. It was the flu. Now all of a sudden it might be throw in a Cuban cigar or two, some drinks, and altitude sickness, and you got a guy who looks gray when he walks into the building that night.
Well, you're right. People always have said a hangover and stuff, and to me that was sort of irrelevant because Michael never slept. Got up and played golf. 3 hours of sleep. If he drank, smoked cigars, that was 13 years of stuff, and he still went out and got 50. So that had nothing to do with it. Yeah, right. There was no reason to,
Yeah.
but it was also part of it was I think you didn't need to add drama to this documentary. It was a great show otherwise, the Jordan story. But it was like, they had the beginning and, the theme of 82-0, Jerry Krause, you're never coming back, and that's it. So you got to end the documentary also in a similar way. He didn't want to play that next year. He could have in any number of ways. So he sort of made that up too at the end, that I wish I could have come back. I wanted to come back. He didn't want to come back. I mean, there was a whole team there other than Scotty, who was limited by the time at the end of the finals, had to have back surgery again. Went to Houston, had a poor season. Left him there. Went to Portland. He was just a role player. So they had Kukoc, Harper, Wennington, Brown. There were numbers. There was a number of the team there, and they had money for free agent. They actually added Brent Barry that season, who was a good free agent. So if he wanted to stay, and Rodman, of course, was coming back for the 1 year, he was begging them for that 1 year deal. And so if he wanted the 1 year and the 40 million, he could have gotten it. And he just didn't want to play. I mean, we saw it with Ahmad in all those scenes that, hey, I've had enough. I'm out of here. I got to move on. So I mean, but it was a better story to end it that way, to say, hey, yeah, one more chance, going for 7. I should have done, we could have done that. And no, he didn't want to do that. But the other thing too about that is we always complain about all these athletes, Unitas and Willie Mays and Ricky Henderson, whatever. Why did they do? Why didn't they just quit on top? We did. He quit on top. We should be celebrating that.
He left us wanting more, and then he came back to the Wizards.
Well, we don't count that.
Oh, we don't. That wasn't in the documentary, therefore it doesn't exist.
Exactly, and it shouldn't be. Well, that one was I was the GM, as you remember. He's the GM of the Wizards. He had supposedly part ownership, and part of Michael is, look, if he could, he would come back and play now, because some of these guys in the documentary challenged him and said he couldn't do it. Brian Russell didn't get interviewed, probably said I could take him now, and he would come back and play again if he could, and he would try. That's who the guy is. He was always about the game more than anything. Yeah, had the famous love of the game clause in his first contract. He really wasn't about the advertising and the marketing. And you saw his mom made him go out to, you got to go see Nike. He just wanted to play, and so that's his nature of the guy. So he couldn't help himself when he went with the Wizards, because he's looking around at all these guys and, he's beating them. He says, I can beat you all in practice. So he's GM and he's playing them all in practice and beating them. So he says, well, I'll go out and play anyway. So, that was just a wonderful part about the guy. You just never could stop him. He just wanted to play games all the time.
Sam, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And, good luck with the Derrick Rose book. And thank you for sharing these stories.
Great to talk to you as usual, Dan.
That's Sam Smith, the Jordan Rules and the I'll Show You autobiography, Derrick Rose and Sam Smith, available now at triumphbooks.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and through your local independent bookstores.